If the future takes the zippers from us, I'm gonna turn into one of those people like, get off my lawn, leave my zippers out of this.
That's how you'll be a cool old school person. Your jacket has zippers? What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I'm a grown man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I'm reading them now as an adult because I'm on a quest to determine if this is a book series that we've all been sleeping on as a society, and I'm not on this quest alone. I am joined by someone who used to podcast in the past and will podcast in the future, so depending on when you're listening to this, look her up and see what she's up to. It's Leah Cornish. Leah, how's it going?
It's going, dude. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. Thank you for being on the show. I was very delighted to learn that you are a big Percy Jackson fan. And even after we arranged this, you let me know that you are Greek, and you said you are shaking your head at many of the things that I've said. So feel free to put me on blast for anything I've said in any of the episodes prior to this. I'm very happy to have you on the show.
No. Thank you. I think I might be your first Greek guest, so I feel very proud about that. Not that the Greek gods and like Greek humans are like anywhere near the same thing, but I still feel pretty good about it.
Hey, it's a title that you can run with forever. First Greek guest on TNO, or at least first Greek guest to admit that they are Greek on TNO. We may have had someone else, but no one said anything. But yeah, I do feel strange sometimes when I'm talking about Greek things versus Greek things. It makes me feel like one should maybe be spelled differently. So that, you know, maybe one has like a E with a umlaut or an accent mark or something. So I can be clear when I'm saying Greek stuff. I don't mean from the country of Greece necessarily.
Yeah, no, whenever you say like, oh, that's just a Greek thing, I always have this like instinctual moment of like, it's not, oh, no, the gods. I got you.
Yeah, so far, no Greek things. But maybe they'll go to Greece in a future book. Who's to say?
Who's to say? Certainly not me. I've never read them.
So that is a good transition point, since that is a blatant lie. What is your history with the Percy Jackson books? How did you get into them? Where's your fandom? All that good stuff.
I've been trying to place it like ever since you were like, come on the pod. And I know where I was. So it was between late 2007, early 2009. Because I know I was in my college dorm, but I had that apartment for 2 years. So like in that range, I know the only book I had to wait for was The Last Olympian. I went out and I was at Borders in Columbus Circle, RIP.
Rip.
I remember just seeing it and I picked it up, and I always like, I love Greek mythology. I love mythology in general, but like the Percy Jackson books or Hades the video game, like I'll just pick it up like if it has to do with mythology, because like, I don't know, it's really fun. And I just remember reading the first one on the train back to my dorm and being done with it, like pretty much by the time I was like back in my room, and I was like, guess I'm going to Borders tomorrow.
Yeah. My wife Kelly did that for the third book. We were taking a train to go to a celebration party for my aunt. She was celebrating being a nun for 60 years, which is awesome. Yeah. And we took a train down to New Jersey, and it was like a 2 to 3 hour train with transfers and all that. And Kelly finished the book, I think, in one direction, or at least by the time we were home, she completed The Titan's Curse.
Yeah, so I was probably 21 or so when I read these, and I just ate them up. They were so great. I wish I had them as a kid, but I had them when they needed to appear. I really love these books. And I've read the Kane Chronicles, right?
Yes.
And almost all of the one that's got the Mark of Apollo in
the
it.
Heroes of Olympus.
Yes. I got to get back on that train now, because now I can't stop reading them. Ever since I started reading them for this, I'm like, gosh, damn it, this is so good.
You have continued the trend for this book where I think 100% of guests who have been on the podcast for Titan's Curse episodes have continued to read either the rest of the book or the whole rest of the series. My buddy Steven, who was always trying to be just on whatever book I was doing for the episodes, now he's on the second book in the sequel series. So this book, as many people predicted, is the one that really kind of makes you want to go all in and blitz your way through. And I'm really seeing why, especially with this chapter, chapter 16, we meet the Dragon of Eternal Bad Breath, which is super intense.
I was shook when I reread this last night. I was like, there's so much in here.
Yeah. It's a big one. I hope we can get through all of it. I think we will, but if we don't, I wouldn't be surprised, because it is beefy.
It's a beefy
Not necessarily
boy.
in terms of number of pages, but in terms of intensity of said pages. lot going on here. So let's see how much we can get through in an hour. Now, I always try to predict what's going on. Again, this one feels pretty easy. My guess would just be that they meet Layden, who already has been established to be a dragon and to be a dragon in the place where they're going. So this does not feel like a very hard guess for Mike Schubert, but I'll take a victory when I can, because I am good, I've learned, at guessing the big picture things, and I am trash at guessing what it is based off the chapter title. So, the balance, just like Thanos' knife, everything balanced in its order.
Amazing.
The other thing this made me think of, I don't know if you're a big Flight of the Conchords fan at all, but they have the song I'll Be the Racist Dragon that I don't think is actually a track. I think it's only from their HBO stand-up special.
Okay.
Maybe their first one, which is, I would put in the top 5 of comedy stand-up specials of all time. But they have a song called I'll Be the Racist Dragon, which is just very funny, and it just starts with "In the Marmalade Forest," and I was just imagining that playing the whole time as they make their way here.
I'm gonna have to look it up because I love the Conchords, but I haven't seen all of their stuff, so I'm in. Let's go.
Cannot recommend their special enough. It's got, I think, my favorite joke potentially in any stand-up thing ever, because they're from New Zealand. It's their first time being in New York, or at least their biggest one. They're doing this big HBO half-hour set, and they are on the stage, and Jermaine says, "Hi, thanks for having us. It's such a pleasure to be here." And then he turns his guitar to look at the back of his guitar and says, "It's such a pleasure to be here in America." It's so good.
God, I love them. Ugh, now I gotta watch Conchords. All right. You just keep adding to my list, Mike Schubert.
You're welcome. I gotta get HBO to maybe sponsor it. Free shout outs. What am I doing here? Anyway, Percy Jackson. So where we last left our heroes, we learned that they need to go across the Golden Gate Bridge into Marin to go to the Mountain of Despair, and they got to get there by sunset. Zoe says they are not moving fast enough to make it in time, but they cannot leave the Authoris. Bessie moves, and narrator Percy calls him Bessie, so I'm going to call him Bessie. I was scared in the last episode. I know this is for a fictional creature, but I still didn't want to, dead name Bessie.
Yeah.
So I kept saying the Authoris, but because narrator Percy keeps calling him Bessie, I'm going to keep calling him Bessie, and I feel okay. It's way less syllables. I would love to do it.
I mean, we can reclaim Bessie for any gender. It's Bessie. He's Bessie. Let's go.
I guess I was just worried because Bessie said that's not my name, but Bessie has not protested to it any further, maybe? So, Bessie, you can reach out. You can send me an email if you want me to not. But for the simplicity of the pod, you're Bessie. Now, Percy asks why they have to arrive at sunset, and Zoe clarifies that the Hesperides are the nymphs of the sunset, so they can only enter the garden when day changes to night. Percy asks what happens if they miss it, and I really like that he's asking all of the different possibilities. This is how I operate just in life, in business, in anything. I want to know every single opportunity. I even do this when I'm playing RPG video games. I will walk down every hallway, even if it's a dead end, especially if it's a dead end, because maybe there's a treasure chest. I need to know everything before I continue. So I like that Percy's doing this.
Yeah. What if there's a piece of notepaper in a drawer underneath a staircase and it's got something on it you don't know?
Yeah. Even if it's just a flavor text thing, I want to collect all the rectangles.
Yep. That's it.
So Zoe says that they would have to wait until tomorrow evening if they don't get in today. But the problem is tomorrow is the solstice, so the meeting would already be over by the time they could enter. Zoe says that they must save Artemis tonight. Percy thinks, or Annabeth will be dead, but he doesn't say it. I like that he's got his priorities lined up, but he also knows that they might not be the most correct priorities, so he doesn't voice them. Thalia says they need a car. Percy says that won't work for Bessie, and Grover then has an idea that the Authoris can appear in different bodies of water, so why not coax him back to the Long Island Sound and have Chiron take him to Olympus. And I gotta say, not gonna be easy to try to convince someone to go from the waters of the Pacific Ocean in California in December. Hey, you got to go to New York instead. Going to be a tough weather sell.
In fairness, though, right? This is by San Francisco, so that's icy. That's the stuff that you can't get off of Alcatraz because of. That's chilly water.
That is very true. San Francisco definitely is a lot colder, and even in the terrible climate times we are now, I did see a fun map that was like, everything's 100, and it's still 68 and sunny in San Francisco. And I looked back and yearned for the 7 months I lived in the Bay Area. I may have told this story once on one of my podcasts before, but I'll tell it again. I lived in the Bay Area for 7 months, and during that time, the summer passed. And I remember one day coming home, and my place didn't have air conditioning because you don't really need it. And I was so hot. I was sweating coming home from work, and I was thinking, oh my God, what temperature is, it is so hot out. And I looked at the thermostat and it was 78.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that's 3 degrees too many. What's going on?
I feel you.
I think at this point I had been there for maybe 3 months. I became the most spoiled weather brat in a quarter of a year.
I buy that. I have coworkers on the West Coast and one in San Francisco. And I'm like, it's a heat wave in New York and you're in California in a sweatshirt. Get out.
Yeah, I had to go live in other places with worse weather so that I could become a better, more grounded person. Anyway, Grover says, let's get Bessie over to the Long Island Sound, and then Chiron can take him to Olympus. But Percy points out that Bessie has been following him, so how would Bessie know where to go? And then narrator Percy notes that Bessie says moo forlornly, which is glorious. Love Bessie.
Love Bessie.
Grover says that he can show Bessie and offers to go with him. But Percy knows that Grover isn't a big fan of the water, so he feels like he shouldn't necessarily be the one to go. But Grover's justification is that he's the only one who can communicate with the Authoris, so he should be the one to go. And that does make sense, because if you're trying to convince someone to go across the entire country, maybe you want to be able to talk to them about what's going on.
Yeah, we stand a rational king. Like, if somebody had to force me onto Long Island, yeah, I guess so.
Grover whispers in Bessie's ear, and then Bessie appears more calm and content, and Grover explains that he did the blessing of the wild with a capital W, which should help with safe passage. Grover then instructs Percy to pray to Poseidon for extra safe passage, and then Percy makes a prayer, but Thalia says that a prayer that big, of getting this thing all the way safely to New York, needs a sacrifice. And I thought, since when? They've never done that before. Why would you do this? It feels very, you didn't pick up the homework, professor. Like, why are you making this harder than it needs to be? I mean, maybe it makes sense, and maybe Thalia has more expertise, but this has not been a standard set by the book so far.
Maybe it's because they've been getting a lot of not help because the gods can't help, but there's been a lot of not help going on in this book. So maybe it's like we cannot press our luck at this point.
I think that's the point. I think you're right. But it does, again, as me, maybe it's engineer brain. I just want to know the rules and everything. I want to know the laws of physics of prayer. I want to know how big and what the scale is. You know, if it's because you're crossing 3 time zones, you need to make a sacrifice. But if you're only crossing 2, it's not as big.
And if it's daylight savings, medium sacrifice.
Shout out to daylight savings. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, if it's the future, daylight savings will be a relic of the past.
Fingers crossed.
Whoa, thank goodness. They are getting rid of it. Next year, it's gone, baby. Let's go. I'm very excited for my children to ask me, you had to turn clocks in different directions? Because of oil lamps in the 1700s, and you kept doing it for 300 years?
This next generation, this is going to do a lot of, but why?
I'm so excited for the things that you don't anticipate. There's things that you expect to get better, like no wires in speakers and stuff. But I like the things that our parents were convinced were just gonna exist forever and then just go away, like Rolodexes or something. Like, I want to know, what is the thing that we all use right now that is super normal and we don't view as potentially becoming archaic, that our kids will just ask, what do you mean you use zippers to fasten your clothes together? You know, like something that doesn't feel like it'll ever become outdated.
If the future takes the zippers from us, I'm gonna turn into one of those people like, get off my lawn, leave my zippers out of this.
That's how you'll be a cool old school person. Whoa, your jacket has zippers? So neat.
I'm going to bring back my Hot Topic era with my trip pants, 82 zippers. None of them are pockets, but lots of zippers.
Look, at the rate things are going with fashion, I think that is going to come back, because now it's just all the stuff from mid 90s. So late 90s, early 2000s. You might not have to wait too long to bust it out.
Yeah, I feel like a dinosaur, thanks.
So Percy then takes off his coat, which Grover thinks is a wild choice since it's been so helpful and since Hercules used it. And that has me very excited, because Hercules, you won't have heard this because we've been recording episodes way in advance, but in the previous episode, when I was trying to guess of who I thought the person in Zoe's dream was, I was thinking it was Hercules because of Zoe's line where she says, doesn't every boy want to be him? And that was a pretty big hint. So when Hercules got name dropped, I felt very excited. Then Percy glances at Zoe, and he knows immediately that the hero is Hercules. And Percy identifies him as a hero I'd admired all my life. So, you know, felt pretty obvious. Percy says if he's going to survive, it's not going to be because of the coat. And I thought, okay, you might be right, but maybe make the sacrifice first and then say that. Because what if Poseidon hears you say, I don't really need this thing? Like, then it's not a big sacrifice. Do it first and then say, ha ha ha, I didn't really need this thing.
Dad, this magic Kevlar, it's nothing. Like, whatever.
Yeah, I get his point, but maybe just keep that inside so that your dad doesn't think you're just doing the thing in a video game where, you know, you get the upgraded version of the armor and I need more space in my inventory. So yeah, I'll sell the old one, but maybe just wait a little bit, Percy. Come on.
A little bit.
Percy tosses the jacket into the water. It returns to its lion fur form, and then it seemingly dissolves in the light of the water and it disappears.
I just love the part where Percy goes, I'm not Hercules, because my immediate thought was, honey, no, he's Hunkules.
Ah!
It's the only thing that ran through my brain.
Zero to hero. Yeah. So Grover hops in the water, grabs Bessie's back. They have a fun little back and forth where Grover explains where they're headed. And he says, okay, Bessie, we're going to Long Island. It's east, over that way. Bessie goes, moo? With a question mark. And Grover says, yes, Long Island. It's this island. And it's long. Let's just start. And then Bessie goes, moo, with an exclamation point. No notes. A+. Perfect exchange. Bessie then plunges underwater right as Grover is trying to explain that he can't breathe underwater. And it's just so fun. And I've talked earlier in episodes about this book about how talented Rick is when it comes to making us fall in love with characters quickly. That totally extends to creature characters because Blackjack and Rainbow and Bessie are all beloved. They're all wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. I kind of feel like Bessie knew Grover can't breathe underwater and just like made a move and was like, no, but this is funnier. Like, that's kind of where I'm at with Bessie.
Comedic timing genius Bessie. Bessie will also have to join the improv team at Camp Half-Blood, the Laugh Bloods.
The Laugh Bloods. That's why Bessie's the Bane of Olympus. It's an improv.
Oh, Bane of Olympus, because all Bessie does is make dad jokes and puns. Oh, yeah. Bessie, not again. Now, narrator Percy then says a great line, quote, I hoped my father's protection would extend to little things like breathing. Glorious. Love it.
Love it.
Zoe goes, okay, that's one problem, but we still have the whole getting to the garden problem. Percy agrees with Thalia's earlier statement that they need a car, but the problem is they don't have one, and Percy doesn't really want to steal one. And Thalia's suggestion, which I found very interesting, is that they reach out to Annabeth's dad, and I totally forgot that he existed and that he was in California.
I remember reading it and then also on rereading. The second it was like San Francisco, I was like, oh, right. I remembered that we were going to the Chases, but I remember my first reading and I was like, oh my God, let's go. I need to see Annabeth's family to know, like, because it's not just Athena, right? You got to know that she's got to get some of her stuff from her dad and the others around her. So, like, hype.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Narrator Percy says, after hearing Annabeth gripe about her dad for 2 years, I was expecting him to have devil horns and fangs. I was not, in italics, expecting him to be wearing an old-fashioned aviator's cap and goggles. He looked so weird, with eyes bugging out through the glasses, that we all took a step back on the front porch. And then in a friendly voice, he asks if they are delivering his airplanes. And I figured, okay, probably talking about model airplanes, right? Not real airplanes? They say no, and he says, drat, I need 3 more Sopwith camels. And then the book says, right, I said, though I had no clue what he was talking about. We're friends of Annabeth.
That's the only response in that moment, because either you go, like, a camel, like, there's no way to respond to that. Like, you just have to move on.
Just got to say, yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. And to Dr. Chase's credit, he is immediately alarmed right away, asking, is she all right? Has something happened? He seems really sweet, which is nice. So no one answers, but also no one has a poker face, which is how I live my life. This is fun because we're recording this on August 26th, just did the live show 2 days ago, and people both in person and on the stream, I guess if it was their first time seeing my face, they go, oh, I see what you mean. Your face is so expressive. I see why you would be very bad at poker.
Making no money.
Nope. I don't like the game at all, and I know that I'm not necessarily strong suited for it, so I just avoid it. But I appreciate people saying this about my face as opposed to the normal thing, which I never enjoy ever. And I don't know if you had this with podcasting, but anytime I post a picture or video and people comment, oh my God, this is not what I expected you to look like. You look so different, or it's so weird putting your voice to a face. I know that people don't mean bad things by it, but my brain always goes, my face looks wrong. And then I feel bad about it.
Yeah. Guys, just don't say things like that. Let's just not.
There's this thing you can do in life called thinking something and then not saying something or not commenting something. You can just think a thought and then not post it. Or you can type it out and then hit backspace a lot.
Yep. You keep it for yourself. Inside, it's only for you forever.
So nobody's got a good poker face. He can tell something is wrong. He takes off his cap and his goggles, and he is sporting sandy-colored hair just like Annabeth, and he has intense brown eyes. Percy identifies him as handsome for an older guy. I like that Percy is comfortable enough to do this, even as a teen, not to be like, oh, all boys are ugly because I like girls. But he does note that Dr. Chase has not shaved in a few days, and his shirt was buttoned wrong, which I do sometimes, and his collar was disheveled. So he clearly has a scattered, intense, so lost in my work, I'm not really worried about my appearance vibe about him.
He gives, not quite, because very family man, but he gives a little bit Arthur Weasley. Like, this is my tinker room and all that stuff. Or honestly, my other thought is Rick Moranis from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, just like up there.
Yes, God. Yeah, that's, I mean, no joke. That's exactly the type of person that I was imagining. That's a great pull. So he welcomes them in, and the house doesn't look like he's just moved in there. There are Lego robots on the stairs. There's 2 cats on a sofa. There's a coffee table littered with magazines, and there's a kid's winter coat on the floor. It smells like fresh baked cookies. I need to know if they're blue. Jazz music is playing as well, and it just seems like a happy, welcoming home that he's lived in forever. So 2 kids come running in arguing about one taking apart the other's Lego robots. I was very sad that mid-2000s he didn't make a Lego Bionicles reference, because this would have been right in the timeline of Bionicles, which I had some of, and I would have loved if they made that specific mention.
I forgot Bionicles existed. All right.
Yep. You can't ever forget about the people from Matanui. Is that it? Come on, please tell me I'm right.
Isn't that Moana's name?
No. Matanui was the great spirit created by the great beings to explore and observe the galaxy, according to bionicle.fandom.com.
Wow.
Let's go. I had 2 Bionicles. I had the blue one that had a cool little skateboard type thing, and then the red one that had hook hands. Loved them.
That's cool. I think I was a little too old for Bionicles. So, like, I know them, but I don't know them.
Bionicles, come back. If those come back in a fashion, let's go. I'll buy some Bionicles. Lego, hit me up. Anyway, these kids are named Matthew and Bobby. Dr. Chase talks to them a little bit, saying, hey, don't argue, don't take apart each other's robots, etc. And then he says to our team that they can follow him up to his study to talk. But then enters Annabeth's stepmom, who's described as a pretty Asian woman with red highlighted hair tied in a bun. And she asks who these guests are, and Dr. Chase kind of stares blankly at the team, and she kind of busts his chops for not asking their names, which I think is pretty funny that it's happening, and also that he didn't. So glad she called him out. They then introduce themselves, and she also seems really nice. I was not expecting her to be nice based on the descriptions that Annabeth gave, so I'm intrigued to see how this kind of plays out in terms of stepmom, step-parent dynamics. I have no experience with this because my parents are still together, but I wonder if this is kind of another thing Rick is doing, another big life situation that he tackles well in the books is what it's like to have step-parents, what it's like to be a stepmom or a stepdad, etc. So I wonder if this will get further fleshed out whenever we see Annabeth again, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, super interesting. And it's nice to bring up. Like, I have a odd family. So, like, especially when you're younger, it can feel sometimes it's awkward for you, even though, like, people around you wouldn't notice it's awkward. You're like, what? This is just normal. But, like, internally, you're like, oh, I feel like I don't belong and all that. And, like, who knows? That could be a lot of what was, you know, having a preteen, young teenage girl feel like that. Like, we don't actually know. Also, is it just me, or when Rick writes the scene where Mrs. Chase talks to him, it almost sounds like Percy doesn't actually say his name. She just kind of goes, oh, Percy, Annabeth said a lot about you. And it felt to me like she clocked Percy immediately.
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to go back and see exactly if that happened. But yeah, I feel like she knows exactly who he is. She does mention that she's heard a lot about him. Yeah. So especially since he's the only boy in attendance, that would probably make it pretty clear.
Annabeth maybe tells her mom about the cute, or her stepmom about the cute boy. Maybe. I don't know. That's adorable.
Right. She seems super nice. She asks if they're hungry. They say that they are. And she says that she'll bring cookies, sandwiches, and sodas. And at this point, this is the ultimate question that happens in the Percy Jackson books. Is this person nice, or are they being overly nice because they're evil? I feel no sense of security when someone is really nice, because it could be the best case scenario, hey, this person's really nice, or the worst case scenario, they're going to murder you because they're a monster.
That's, yeah.
But if she does end up being nice, that I think would be very cool, because I feel like in a lot of media, especially stuff geared towards children, step parents are always the worst, whether you've got the evil stepmom from Cinderella or anything else, even just the bumbling, incompetent stepdad. I feel like it's such a trope that it would be cool if Rick wrote into this book, yeah, her stepmom is perfectly nice. Annabeth is just upset because she's not her real mom. So sometimes that can happen. I think it's a good way to kind of show kids sometimes your step parent can be okay, but at the same time, it's still a frustrating situation. I'm really intrigued to see if this gets fleshed out over the series.
Same.
So Dr. Chase tells his wife that the reason the team is here is because of Annabeth, and Percy expects her to become enraged, but instead she just looks concerned. She tells them to go on up and that she'll bring the food up soon when it's all ready. And then she kind of calls for Percy and says that it was nice to meet him and that she's heard a lot about him. Again, this is either awe or oh no, because did she hear about it from Annabeth, or did she hear about it from the gods because she's evil? The red highlight was another thing where it's just, is this a fun detail, or am I supposed to know, red, it's the color of so-and-so, so it's actually so-and-so, you know?
That's actually hilarious, because all I could think of was like, yeah, 2007, them chunky highlights. That's what that was.
There's so many options. It's so terrifying. So when they enter Mr. Chase's study, Percy lets out an audible whoa, and it's wall-to-wall books, but there's also loads of war toys and miniatures and models. There's even airplane models hanging from the ceiling, made to look like they are in the middle of a dogfight. And then Dr. Chase says, quote, yes, the third battle of Ypres. I'm writing a paper, you see, on the use of Sopwith camels to strafe enemy lines. I believe they played a much greater role than they've been given credit for. And yeah, I totally know what's going on. Yep, great. I know every word you just said, Dr. Chase. Let's move on. Zoe analyzes the battlefield and says the German lines were farther from the river. And Dr. Chase asks how she knows that, and she says she was there, which is great.
I love Zoe quite a bit.
Big fan. She clarifies that Artemis wanted to show the hunters how horrible war was and how foolish mortals can be when they fight each other like this. Good lesson to learn. So shout out to Artemis for, I guess, it feels like when you go to school and you do immersive learning, it's like a field trip, or when you have outside class or whatever. It's like, hey, folks, we're going on a field trip to see how terrible human beings are sometimes.
Do you think Artemis then, like 30 years later, was like, here we go again?
Oh, no. Dr. Chase is shocked. Thalia explains she's a hunter, but says that's not why we're here. Let's get to the task at hand. She starts to explain, but then he does ask Zoe a follow-up about the Sopwith camels, and Thalia has to remind him, hey, Annabeth's in danger? Can we kind of talk about Annabeth? And he goes, oh, right, yeah, sorry. So he asks for them to tell him everything. They do their best to do so. The sun is setting, though, so they're running out of time, so they really try to speed things up. Zoe says they need transportation to Mount Tamalpais?
Tamalpais,
that's how you pronounce it? Okay, thank you. They need to get there, and they need to get there quickly. I did Google it, and it's the tallest peak in Marin, and it's right by Muir Woods, which I've been to. I don't think I've actually hiked this particular trail, but I have done a bunch of trails in Muir Woods. Highly recommend, especially, I don't know which one it is, but one of them has a small little bed and breakfast all the way near the top of the mountain. And even if you're not staying there, you can hike up there and get a pancake and sausage/bacon breakfast. And it's really good. And I highly recommend. We were hiking up. We had no idea this was on the trail, but people walking down kept talking about bacon and pancakes and sausage. We're like, why is everybody talking? Like, there's a pancake restaurant at the top of the mountain. And then there was, and it was great.
That is literally the only reason I would ever hike up a mountain, is if you were like, dog, there's bacon and pancakes. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm hiking.
Yep. It was really, really good. And I was going with friends from Rice, and we were supposed to go to some Bay Area alumni thing. And the plan was, we'll go on a hike, we'll go down, we'll have just enough time to get there. And then when we got to the pancake restaurant, we realized, all right, we're either doing this or we're not going to the alumni thing. We didn't go to the alumni thing. We enjoyed the pancake restaurant and the rest of the hike. A+ decision.
Good decision.
No regrets at all. Anyway, Percy Jackson, Dr. Chase offers to drive. And then he says that flying his camel would be the best option, but it only seats 2. Percy's shocked that he actually has a biplane. And then Dr. Chase explains that that's why he moved. His sponsor for this book is a private collector with World War I relics who let him restore the camel. And that makes way more sense than him just moving to California to write a book. Mm-hmm. I am put at ease knowing he moved for a legitimate reason.
Same.
Thalia says they just need a car, and honestly, it would probably be better if they went without him so that he can stay out of danger. And then Mrs. Chase enters with PB&J sandwiches, sodas, and cookies, and Zoe says that she can drive because she's older than she looks, and she promises not to destroy his car, which confirms that this car is screwed and it is not going to be okay.
Oh, cars and Percy Jackson have it rough.
They really do. Mrs. Chase asks what this is all about, and Dr. Chase says, quote, Annabeth is in danger on Mount Tam. I would drive them, but apparently it's no place for mortals. And he really struggles to get out the last bit, which I didn't really know how to interpret. And it did also have me a little worried that, is the stepmom also a magical ancient Greek type character? Does Dr. Chase have a type? What's going on here? I was wondering what I'm supposed to read into that final line. And again, I'm just a little worried about the stepmom here.
Mm-hmm. I'm just here.
Thank you. Trapdoor not activated. You are okay. You won't get whooshed out for spoiling. Percy is waiting for Mrs. Chase to refuse, but she says that they better get going. Dr. Chase looks for his keys. Again, Mrs. Chase kind of pokes fun at him for being all scatterbrained, saying if he didn't wear that hat, his head would fall off, and reminds him that his keys are on the peg by the front door. Zoe thanks them. They all begin to rush out, but then Mrs. Chase calls to Percy and says, tell Annabeth, tell her she has a home here, will you? Remind her of that. So sweet. She seems so nice.
Yeah, I love that a lot.
Percy promises to deliver the message, and then they hop in the convertible yellow Volkswagen because, of course, it is a convertible yellow Volkswagen, and they get on the road. But let's take a little bit of a break here for the Titans Purse, the mid-roll break where we'll talk about cool things like how you can watch the replay of the aforementioned live show. Oh, you want to see that? You can watch the replay of Stephen Parra and I playing Hades the video game if you join the Patreon. So many fun things. Whee! Hello and welcome to the Titans Purse Denver edition. I'm coming to you live from my hotel room here in Denver, Colorado, where I am in town for LeakyCon, the Harry Potter convention. I'm having a fun time. I'm taking a little break from the festivities to talk to you about all the fun things going on in the world of TNO and Mike Schubert and beyond. I announced that this was happening last week, but we had our first stream of the new Dungeons & Dragons Twitch stream that I'm doing with Gabrielle Urbina and Beth Eyre and Emma Sherjarko called 20 to Midnight. We did it this past week, and it was so much fun. You can watch the replay of it. I believe it might still be live on the Twitch or our YouTube. If you go to our website, 22midnight.com, so 20tomidnight.com, you can find all the links for all of the stuff, but I'm playing a very lighthearted, jovial bard in our first stream. We already got into an intense fight and have been undergoing some intense investigations to figure out what mystery is afoot. It's been really fun. It was a beautifully wholesome session with some beautifully wholesome people, and I think that beautifully wholesome journey will continue. So if you want to see me and some fun folks playing D&D, check out 20 to Midnight. We will be streaming Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time every other Wednesday, and then the replays will be live on Twitch and YouTube, so you don't have to watch it live, or you can just watch part of it. It's very fun, and I hope you all check it out. I also have ocean-themed dice, which is very fun. They were given to me by a listener, Madison, who came to the Portland TNO/Potterless live show, and they are great. And every time I roll of them, I think of Percy and the newest Olympian, so very, very on brand. In the world of TNO, I wanted to make sure people know that if you go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon, you can support our Patreon. You'll get access to a bunch of bonus content and such. And also you have the ability, if you want to commit to a full year of patronage, you can do so. And you get, I believe, 15% off on what it would normally cost if you paid by the month. So if you really know you want to support the show for a long time, but you'd like to save a little bit of money on your way towards doing so, you can join at the yearly option. And that is available to you. There's lots of fun stuff over at the Patreon. And speaking of the Patreon, I want to thank the newest members of our team. So shout out to our newest God tier patron, Lonnie, and shout out to our newest demigod tier patrons, Nathaniel Bachelder and Miriam Schmelter. I'd also like to give a special shout out to two folks in the Ultra God tier that somehow slipped through the cracks. I am very sorry. So shout out to Rachel Bernatowicz and Sarah Neal. I am so sorry somehow I didn't get the notification. That happens sometimes with Patreon, especially if you did support me at one point in time with Potterless since I transitioned the Potterless Patreon over. So if you've joined and it's been more than 2 weeks and I haven't said your name, please send me a message on Patreon and let me know that I've missed saying your name. I want to make sure I'm saying your name. It's part of your pledge is that you get a shout out. So let me know if I missed that. But to those patrons, thank you so much for your support. May Nyx, who at least in Hades the video game is the goddess of the night, I believe, may she bless you that if you are utilizing blackout curtains to try to make your room nice and dark when you go to sleep, that they actually function properly and you can sleep in nice darkness. Also, if you're all caught up on the newest Olympian, but you want some more Mike Schubert content in your life, I am very happy to report I have a website that has links to everything that I do/am doing. If you go to Schubs, so schub.es, you can check out links to all of the other podcasts that I work on, as well as some sketch video stuff and improv video things I've done in the past. Lots of fun stuff all over there. I will continue to update it, especially I need to get on it and update this new D&D thing and find my way there. But yeah, I got a website. You can check it out. It's all there. It's all good stuff. Yeah. And before we wrap up here, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. Some of these ads will be read by me. Others of them won't. The ones that are not read by me are inserted locally. So if you live in Denver, Colorado, don't be surprised if you hear an ad for sunglasses, because apparently it's really sunny here all of the time. You guys like to brag about the number of days of sunlight you get in a year, which is very cool. So good for you. Maybe you'll get a sunglasses sponsorship at the local ad. Who's to say? But once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of the newest Olympian. And we're back, and our team is on the road. Thalia is getting impatient. Zoe reminds her that she cannot control traffic, and Percy says that they both sound like his mom, and the girls in unison tell him to shut up.
Laughed so loud reading this to myself.
So
I was on
funny.
the train, and people were like, okay.
Zoe weaves through the traffic just like she's Eve in Let Me Blow Your Mind, and Percy asks why everything smells like cough drops. Look, that song's great.
Sorry, it took a second to realize what you did. Sorry.
Quality bop. I love that song so much. And I was in middle school when it came out. And it was funny because the song famously opens with drop your glasses, shake your asses, which always would get silenced on the radio when my sister and I would listen to it. So we developed this bit where we would always go, drop your glasses, shake your butts. We found it to be the funniest thing. We would do it all the time. And now anytime I listen to it, I always just think, drop your glasses, shake your butts.
I can't. I'm very happy. This is just a good day.
Now, Percy asks why everything smells like cough drops, and Zoe says it's eucalyptus, which Percy identifies as the stuff koalas eat. And clearly, Percy's watching a whole bunch of Zooboomafoo that he knows that koalas eat eucalyptus. But Zoe confirms and says that monsters, especially dragons, love to eat it too. And this shocks Percy, but Zoe says, hey, if you had dragon breath, you'd chew it too. Oh, so good.
I know it's apocryphal and it's not true, but like, did you ever hear that koalas get high off of eucalyptus and that's why they're always so sleepy?
Yes, I believe I've heard that. So maybe it's not real, but same thing. I have heard it.
So like, I've heard it. And then I was like, are we sure it's not? Again, I'm old. And I was like, are we sure this is not true? It's not true. But all I can think of is all these monsters are just high as hell all the time. Eating eucalyptus.
Google does confirm that it is just a rumor. They don't get... I love the way they write it because it's from WWF.org. So they're clearly trying to just sound like your parents when they ask you what are edibles. Despite the rumors, koalas don't, quote, get high or, quote, drugged out on eucalyptus leaves. You know, when you're high and you say, oh, I'm so drugged out right now.
Koalas are not smoking a J.
They're not smoking drugs. Oh, man, I got so drugged out last night and I ate a bunch of Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
Now imagine that's a koala saying that.
So just a rumor, but a fun one. Now, they are approaching Mount Tam, which I'm going to say because I can now sound like a cool SF local and not because I don't know how to actually pronounce it. They approach Mount Tam. Percy correctly identifies it as a small mountain by mountain standards, but it's still pretty tall. And as Google told me, it is the tallest peak in Marin County. Percy asks why they call it the Mountain of Despair, and I wrote in my notes, because it's in Marin, where all the fancy, awful, old tech NIMBY people live in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. Zoe gives Percy a more helpful answer, quote, after the war between the Titans and the gods, many of the Titans were punished and imprisoned. Cronus was sliced to pieces and thrown into Tartarus. Cronus's right-hand man, the general of his forces, was imprisoned up there on the summit just beyond the Garden of the Hesperides. And Percy, as the narrator kind of points out, oh, even though Zoe said this with a lowercase g, she means the general capital G. There's a storm atop the mountain. Percy asks what this storm is, and Thalia says that it is the mist being strong up there. And Percy asks, do you mean the natural mist or magical mist? And I thought, oh, right, they're having a conversation. They're reading a book. Percy doesn't know that she said this with a capital M. So a fun little, right, I got to take myself out of this moment. Thalia answers that she means both. And then we get a very scary situation where as they're going across a curved road where you can see the water below, Percy sees a ship that looks like the Princess Andromeda. And that means that they're gonna have company, and it's gonna be Kronos' army, as Zoe confirms, and Percy, as the narrator, confirms that's why they were going to the Panama Canal. It's the only way to get over. A pretty easy prediction to make if you are a 30-year-old man reading this book, but maybe not if you're 10.
Maybe not if you're 35, and bad at geography, and read the book and literally forgot about all of that.
You know, I was just big into Schoolhouse Rock, and they have the one Panama Canal song, so... It served me well.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that does. Jesus.
So, as they are driving, Thalia calls for Zoe to stop immediately. She slams on the brakes, the car spins around twice, and then they stop. They get out of the car, and right after they do so, it erupts in an explosion after a flash of lightning. And I thought, Zeus? What? But Thalia is able to protect Percy with Aegis, protects him from all the shrapnel from the explosion. Percy thanks her for saving his life, and Thalia then quotes the prophecy about dying at the hand of a parent. She wonders why Zeus would try to kill her. But something just seems off, and thankfully Percy kind of also thinks something's not going on. He just is convinced this couldn't have been Zeus's bolt. Something's up. He wonders if it's because Zoe said Kronos' name, but Thalia doesn't think that that's it. So they go and try to find Zoe, but they can't. They call out for her. I was worried that Zoe died in the blast, but thankfully she is okay. But she warns them to keep it down lest they wake Ladin, the dragon. So Percy goes, oh, Ladin, are we here? And Zoe says that they're close and instructs them to follow her. Thalia tells Percy basically, hey, we're about to go into a bunch of mist. Just focus on Zoe. We are here to follow Zoe. Ignore everything else. But before they go into the mist, Percy tries to ask Thalia if she was really going to kill Bessie back there earlier. And Thalia doesn't want to talk about it, but she just says that she was shocked, and that's it, which I did think it was funny that she says shocked, given that she is a daughter of Zeus.
Hey.
I hope they have a more thorough discussion about this after the fact, because I think it would be a good, nice, heartfelt moment. But I also understand time and place. They got to get there quick. Go. Let's keep it moving.
You got to feel for this girl who probably either wants to A, unload, or B, get away. And she can't do either of them in this moment.
Right. And she's only been a human for a couple of months. So not easy for Thalia in many regards. Now, Percy comes up with a hypothesis that I think is accurate. He thinks that the bolt was Kronos' doing in an effort to try and manipulate Thalia to get mad at Zeus. I really like this theory. Thalia doesn't really make it clear if she's convinced or not, but she does thank Percy for making her try to feel better, but she makes it clear, we gotta go, so let's just go. Narrator Percy then says the following. When the fog cleared, I was still on the side of the mountain, but the road was dirt. The grass was thicker. The sunset made a blood-red slash across the sea. The summit of the mountain seemed closer now, swirling with storm clouds and raw power. There was only one path to the top, directly in front of us, and it led through a lush meadow of shadows and flowers, the garden of Twilight, just like I'd seen in my dream. I love when narrator Percy / Rick Riordan does these sorts of things. His scene painting is impeccable.
Yeah, you feel like you're in it. I was getting really anxious about being in this guy. I'm like, this is a lot. This is too much.
I was typing my notes really fast because I was really feeling it. And I think that's what it speaks to with Rick's writing. You can see everything visually because he does a good job of explaining how things look, but you also always get the impression of the emotion of the place and the vibe of the place and the emotion of the characters. It's more than just being able to picture it. You can also feel it. You can really put yourself in the scene. He's so good. He's very good at this. I can see why he's written 9,000 books.
God bless him.
Shout out to Uncle Rick. Rick, come on the pod, please. I'll shower you in compliments. Percy says that if it wasn't for the giant dragon, the garden would be the most beautiful he had ever seen. He says it has shimmering grass and brilliantly colored flowers and black marble stepping stones and a big apple tree with golden apples that he's tempted to pick. It really has it all. Thalia calls them the apples of immortality and explains that this was Hera's wedding gift from Zeus. And Percy really wants to pluck one, but the dragon is coiled around the tree, so he figures maybe not. Now he describes this dragon, and it is intense. Now, I don't know what you think of when I say dragon in italics. Whatever it is, it's not scary enough. The serpent's body was as thick as a booster rocket, glinting with coppery scales. He had more heads than I could count, as if 100 deadly pythons had been fused together. He appeared to be asleep. The heads lay curled in a big spaghetti-like mound on the grass, all the eyes closed. And it's so funny because this was intense, and then he describes it like spaghetti, and I laughed out loud.
Dragon spaghetti, horrifying.
But at a future Percy Jackson themed restaurant in Disney, dragon spaghetti could be really good.
It would be laden spaghetti.
And then the meatballs are sprinkled with the edible gold that doesn't do anything but makes things expensive.
Yes.
Because it's like the golden apples.
Yes.
Disney, hit me up. TM.
We got this. It'll be right where Mars 2112 once was.
Oh, Mars 2112. A New York relic. Man, we used to do that because I grew up in Jersey. We used to do Mars 2112, Jekyll and Hyde, all the big fun family restaurants.
Yeah.
Shout out to both. Rip to both. Bring it back. It's funny because they bring back all these things where they try to market it now to people who now have spending money to buy things like Dunkaroos when you bring them back and whatever. Even if you just do like a pop-up thing, I'm sure it's way harder to do a pop-up restaurant. But even if all of these places that got closed band together and they just come up with a schedule where, okay, this month it's Mars 2112. This month it's Jekyll and Hyde. I dropped top dollar. Come on. Now I got money to spend. Let me go.
I absolutely would. We visited every summer and sometimes winter New York because I'm from Boston. So like it's not a bad drive. Mm-hmm. But like that restaurant experience, that was the one that we never went back to. My aunts and my mom hated it. It was so bad. Jekyll and Hyde, we did a couple times.
Jekyll and Hyde is at least fun, even though it's overpriced, it's kind of worth it. Mars 2112, I could totally see as not being worth it. For anyone who hasn't been, you're really not missing out. But it's a space future themed thing. You have to go through this portal and there's mist and all that. I'm sure the food is atrocious and very overpriced. There's no world in which it could be anything good. It would make Applebee's look like high quality, fine dining, Michelin star rated food.
Yep.
Regardless, shout out to Mars 2112. Anyway, Percy Jackson. The Hesperides then emerge and they are singing an eerie song. Zoe greets them saying, "Sisters?" But one says, "We do not see any sister. We see two half-bloods and a hunter, all of whom shall die soon." And I wrote, "All right, Chief. Okay, back up here. Coming in way too intense. Let's ease up a bit."
Your Hesperides is giving real buff cartoon character.
I just imagine that they say everything with their hands at their hips. Percy says no one's going to die. One of the sisters identifies him as Perseus Jackson. Another says she doesn't know why he's a threat. And Percy says, "Who said I was a threat?" And the first sister says, "They fear thee. They are unhappy that this," in italics, "one has not yet killed thee." And when they say this, they point at Thalia. Thalia says it's tempting, but she won't because Percy is her friend. Love it. The friendship is back. Let's go. I love when they're close and they're not mad at each other.
Thalia is my favorite. That's exactly what you wanted her to say, and she said it, and I love her.
She's good. She's back in full form, saying cool one-liners, being everybody's punk rock girlfriend. Love it. Glad she's back. One of the sisters says that there are no friends here, only enemies, and they must leave. These people are the worst. I despise them so much. Thalia says that they are not leaving without Annabeth, another great line, but I asked, what about Artemis? And thankfully, Zoe, the next line adds, and also Artemis, which, good. We're all here. We've got our different reasons. We're going to get everybody out of here. Zoe says that they must approach the mountain, but the sister says that he will kill them and they're no match for him, clearly talking about Layden. I think maybe it's about who we meet at the top of the mountain. I'm now realizing in retrospect.
Porque no los dos.
It could be both, but it's probably the latter because we later learn that the dragon doesn't go up the mountain. It just protects the tree. So I guess she was talking about person number 2 who we'll meet soon. Zoe insists that they let them pass so that they can save Artemis, but the sister refuses, saying that Zoe has no rights here and they can simply raise their voices to wake Layden and Layden will kill them. Zoe says that Layden wouldn't hurt her, and then her sister asks, "But what about your so-called friends?" And then Zoe, in a move that I was not anticipating at all, calls out to Layden to wake him up intentionally. Wild!
Bold girl right here.
A bold move, but I respect it. The Hesperides yelp and scatter, so I thought, okay, good decision, clearly. The leader of them asking Zoe if she's gone mad. And Zoe says, "You never had any courage, sister. That is thy problem," which is great. What a good line to say.
Boss moves.
Narrator Percy then says the following. The dragon laden was writhing now, 100 heads whipping around, tongues flickering and tasting the air. Zoe took a step forward, her arms raised. Thalia warns her not to because she's not a Hesperid anymore, but Zoe reveals that she's just being a decoy. She's going to distract the dragon because he's set to guard the tree so she can keep him occupied and the other two can sneak up the mountain. Narrative Percy continues, Laden opened his mouths. The sound of 100 heads hissing at once sent a shiver down my back, and that was before his breath hit me. The smell was like acid. It made my eyes burn, my skin crawl, and my hair stand on end. I remembered the time a rat had died inside our apartment wall in New York in the middle of the summer. This stench was like that, except 100 times stronger and mixed with the smell of chewed eucalyptus. I promised myself right then I would never ask a school nurse for another cough drop.
Vivid. Vivid. And I smelt it and I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I fortunately have never had a rat problem in New York. I've had bug problems and we had smell problems. But when we lived in New Jersey, it was this weird situation where my mom and dad repainted their bedroom, but the combination of primer and paint was making this weird smell that only my mom and I could smell, and my dad and my sister couldn't. And we didn't know if it was the paint or if something like this did something dye in the walls. We'd have people come in and they were doing smoke tests, smell tests, and all that. Ultimately, we just realized it was just a combo of the primer and the paint, but only some of us could smell it. It was so weird. It lasted for weeks, and then ultimately they just had to repaint it again.
Stuff like that, or like the dragon breath, that's a smell that gets stuck
in your nose. Yeah.
And it won't, even when you're gone, you feel like it's there for hours and it's just misery. Ugh, no thank you.
I feel bad for my wife Kelly because she has a much more intense sniffer. She can smell much more. Like, she can tell in my old apartment, my bedroom window facing alleyway, she could tell if someone was smoking in the alleyway because there was a restaurant in the bottom floor. So if people were going out in the back to smoke, she could smell that 4 to 5 floors up, even with the windows closed and everything. So I feel for her. She has the same description you just said, where she feels like the smell is just trapped in her nose. And I do not envy her for having this ability.
No fun.
Percy wants to draw Riptide, but he remembers the dream and how fighting it straight on won't work, so he takes Zoe's advice from the past and knows that sneaking around is the correct approach. Thalia breaks left, Percy breaks right, Zoe pulls the "It's me, remember me, Laden" card, which has Laden kind of confused, so it does seem to be working. Zoe is trying to appeal to the past when she used to feed him, all these sorts of things. Thalia and Percy almost make it out of the meadow and up the mountain trail, where he thinks he can feel the dragon's mood change. And whether the dragon got hungry or Zoe got too close, whatever happened, Laden lunges at Zoe. She successfully dodges and runs towards Thalia and Percy while gagging at the bad breath, which I think is funny. Of all the people to gag, her, who is a no-nonsense person and has a long-standing history with the dragon, if she's still gagging, this must smell atrociously bad.
Yeah. Maybe she had like the Garden Hesperides is like a thing of Vicks like off to the side. So before you get too close to Laden, you're like putting it under your nose so you're okay.
It's just a big Glade Plug-In candle. Percy draws Riptide. Zoe says, "No, run." And then Laden snaps at Zoe's side and does hit her, which is terrifying, but she continues on. Thalia uncovers Aegis, which angers the dragon and distracts him enough to where Zoe sprints past them and up the mountain, and the other two follow. The dragon stays put, though, because it's got to just guard the tree. It does not go up the mountain with him, which is nice. And as they climb, the Hesperides continue their song, but now it sounds more like a funeral hymn. They reach the top of the mountain, and they see marble ruins, black marble, and Thalia identifies these ruins as the ruins of Mount Authoris? Kind of looks like Mount Others, but spelled differently. Now, I want to know more about this from Dr. Moya. Do you have any knowledge of it while we're here or no?
Honestly, only what Percy mentions of it is like my cursory knowledge of it.
Got it. So Zoe says that this wasn't here before, so this is bad. And Percy asks what Mount... Oh, that's funny. My notes app autocorrected it to Mount Others.
Starring Nicole Kidman.
No, Percy asks what Mount Authoris is. Zoe says it was the mountain fortress of the Titans in the First War, and it got blasted to pieces. Zoe's clearly in pain from the bite. I feel so bad for Zoe here. Percy asks how it has been transported here, and Thalia says that it moves kind of like Olympus, but in the evil way, where it's at the edge of civilization. The problem with it being here, though, is that it is Atlas's mountain where he holds up the sky. And Atlas is one of those things where I know that it exists, but aside from the statue and Atlas shrugged and all that, like, I don't know the whole Atlas situation. My knowledge of it starts and ends with, oh yeah, the guy that holds up the sky. I don't know why he had to do it. I don't know what his deal is, but I just know it exists. Incredibly limited knowledge.
You didn't call this beforehand?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And you've got the receipts in me. I called part of this.
Okay.
My last guest, Sherry, our editor, in the last episode asked, what do you think's going on with the general and Zoe? And I basically was like, I don't know what the general's deal is. I don't know what he is, but I'm pretty sure he's Zoe's dad.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at. But narrator Percy says the following, quote, a few yards ahead of us, gray clouds swirled in a heavy vortex, making a funnel cloud that almost touched the mountaintop, but instead rested on the shoulders of a 12-year-old girl with auburn hair and a tattered silvery dress. And at this point I said, yes, resting on her shoulders. Okay, Alice, I totally get this now. Artemis, her legs bound to the rock with celestial bronze chains. This is what I had seen in my dream. It hadn't been a cavern roof that Artemis was forced to hold. It was the roof of the world. And yeah, I didn't predict this at all because I'm not familiar with the Atlas myth. I don't know if there's other parts in the story that point to it as if that is the basis of this one, kind of like how the Odyssey was the basis of the second book. Mm-hmm. I'm completely out on that. So I didn't guess that at all. Just complete whoosh. I just thought, oh yeah, it's a trap. And it's like the superhero thing where Spider-Man has to hold up the building so that people can escape. That's as far as I went with it. I did not think, clearly, this is the myth of Atlas.
When I was little, I had Delair's Book of Greek Myths, which is like, they still publish it.
Yeah.
And I got it like when I was 9 or something like that. And they tell the labors of Hercules, and Atlas and Hercules encounter one another. And so I understood the second it was like Annabeth taking Luke's place, I think the very top of the book. I remember it like just clicking immediately. I was like, oh, dog, I know this one. This is a thing.
So I've heard of Delair's. I've not read it. I was gifted by a listener of the show who came to the TNO live show. At least their Twitter name says that their name is Charlie, but it's at Horde Kitten with 2 N's on Twitter. Shout out to them. They gave me a book called The Greek Myths by Robert Graves, and Rick Riordan does the foreword of it. And it's really cool. The cover of it makes it all look comic book style, and then it's just pages upon pages of Greek myths. So I've not delved into it yet, but I look forward to doing so in the future. Maybe after I've finished the books, because I think it's fun that I don't know the Greek myths so that I can't predict things. So it's fun to have a more limited knowledge, but down the road, can't wait to read this one. And maybe I'll check out Delair's as well.
I loved it as a kid. I can say for certain that I got it at 9, and then a year later, when I was 10, is when Disney's Hercules came out.
That's so cool.
And I can say for certain it kind of did me the first, oh God, this is so different from the source material.
Oh, you were a snoot at age 9/10.
I was so annoyed that it was called Hercules and not Heracles. It bothers me to this day.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so good. I'm intrigued to see how much of this is Atlas versus just the character versus the whole story. Mm-hmm. If we have you back, we can ask if you knew when you were reading this, it's the Atlas, but I don't want to know. Anyway, back to the story. Zoe approaches Artemis to save her, but Artemis warns that it is a trap, and she looks absolutely rough. Sweat, dirt, grime, all sorts of bad stuff going on. Zoe is in tears. And then the general booms from behind them, how touching. And at his side is Luke and half a dozen Dracani, and they are holding the sarcophagus of Kronos like the worst pallbearers of all time. Annabeth is at Luke's side, and Luke has his sword to her throat in classic Luke form, his go-to move. Annabeth shoots Percy a look, and he can read her expression clear as day that she's trying to tell him, run. Thalia tells Luke to let Annabeth go, and he looks even worse than he did just 3 days ago in DC, with his smile looking pale and forced. And he says that it's the general's decision, but, quote, it's good to see you again. And then Thalia spits at him, which I was not anticipating, but I love.
Let's go.
Based on vibes earlier when she was talking about Luke, it felt a little bit like I can fix him energy. Mm-hmm. And for her to go immediately to the spit, loved it. A+. Happy for it.
I think it's that moment of seeing a goddess and also your really good friend Annabeth and surrounded by all this like evil presence. And Thalia's like, just kidding, get wrecked.
Right. Maybe it is just she's finally been confronted with the situation and she can truly see the harm that Luke has done, the evil that has absorbed him, the people that he is associating with, the people he's putting in danger. And maybe it was just the immediate, oh, screw this person, I'm out, 180 flip.
Mm-hmm.
The general then laughs. So much for old friends. And you, Zoe, it's been a long time. How is my little traitor? I will enjoy killing you. And I thought, uh-oh. But then I also thought, ooh, my little traitor feels like something could be the dad. Maybe I'm right. Artemis begs her not to respond and not to challenge him. And then Percy, to my surprise, says, wait a second, you're Atlas? And then I just wrote in my notes, okay, I don't know enough about this myth. And it's funny because the general kind of makes fun of him for being able to put it together, and I clearly couldn't put it together, so it kind of felt like the general was making fun of me. He says, so even the stupidest of heroes can finally figure something out. Yes, I am Atlas, the general of the Titans, and terror of the gods. Congratulations. I will kill you presently, as soon as I deal with this wretched girl. Percy steps in, saying that he won't let him hurt Zoe, and the general says that he has no right because it's a family matter, and Zoe then admits Atlas is her dad. Let's go!
Oh no. Now what's this do to our prophecy?
Yeah, so if we're going back to what I said about the prophecy, part of what led me to think that the general was Zoe's dad is that if someone was to die by the hand of their father, Zoe was in high contention because I didn't think it was going to be Grover or Percy or Thalia. So it was really between Bianca and Zoe. And I feel like I flip-flopped a little bit. I would have to listen to the old episodes, but I'm pretty sure I landed on someone's going to die at the hand of the father. It's probably Zoe. And I didn't know if that meant that her dad was the general or Kronos, but it felt like that was what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I'm feeling pretty good about being right here. I'm pretty solid when it comes to the big picture and reveals. But as mentioned earlier, I'm quite bad when it comes to the little guesses. And I'm clearly not good at the mythology stuff because I didn't see the Atlas thing coming at all. So small, tiny victory for Mike Schubert. 50-50, we can call it even. Didn't get the Atlas part, got the father part. Hooray! Do you remember when you read this book, did you have any sort of prediction of how the general fit in? Did you think it was going to be her dad? Were you surprised by this big reveal?
I remember being surprised about the dad bit. It was one of those things where I plucked the mythology out because I understood once I picked out the holding up the sky part, I picked out the general was probably another Titan, and then I picked out Atlas. So I was like, okay, this is how this is going to roll. I remember very clearly not putting together that Zoe would have been a child of Atlas and whomever, because I think Dr. Moya will tell this, but I honestly don't think there is one answer as to who the Hesperides or children's are. I think there's 12 answers.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to learn more. But yeah, I think you're right. That does kind of settle everything with the prophecy in that we've got Bianca lost. We would at least feel like Zoe will die at the hand of the general. And because the general is an ally of the Titans, I would guess that the titular Titan's curse is what Percy has been withstanding, because it does say just one will withstand. That's been the zombies following. They haven't explicitly said the Titan's curse is the skeletons, but I would guess that that's going to happen in chapter 17, which will be on the next episode. But Leah, thank you so much for joining. If people want to find you doing stuff, do you want to just shout out the Twitter for now? And that would maybe link to a future podcast if you get back into the mix?
Yeah. If you want to hear anything I have done in the past, like talking about Steven Universe, Supernatural, doing Star Trek RPGs, whatever, I got all that stuff in a link tree in my bio on my Twitter, which is at Leah, Leah 617. I think I'm a solid follow. I'm kind of funny. I retweet things that make me laugh. I talk about BTS a heck of a lot. It's good times. It's good times on my Twitter.
The BTS stuff is good. You and Kelly were both at Hobie-palooza / Lollapalooza, but in different places. But yeah, my wife flew up just to go to Lollapalooza.
Oh, I do not know Kelly, but I wish I did. So I could be like, well, let's hang out at Hobie-palooza.
I'm sure there will be many a future event to go with her with. I think even tonight she's going to a movie screening of one of the documentary movies where it's all BTS, but they, bring the soul or, bash the spike, whatever the BTS, forget what it is. Yeah. But she's going to that tonight. But yeah, hey, you can check out Kelly's Etsy store where she does patches and stickers and keychains for BTS stuff. Magic Shop patches. There's some good stuff. Highly recommend.
I did. I love her patches. I noticed them the other. Good on you for plugging your wife's Etsy, because I was like, let me go check this out. I was like, oh my God, let's go. Like, I'm in. You know how to sell it, Mike.
Thank you. I mean, they're legitimately very well designed, because Kelly is very good at graphic design. She's done a lot of graphic design stuff for my podcasting career, so I'm glad she's doing stuff on her own and people love her stuff. So yeah, everybody check it out. But Leah, thank you so much for joining. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And until we find out what's going on in chapter 17, which is apparently going to be a spicy one, until then, I'll see you later. Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor and TikTok account runner is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamanes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you want to get involved in the community around the show, you can do so on social media. We are at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Facebook also has the spoiler group and the spoiler-free group. We also are at reddit.com/r/The Newest Olympian. If you want to take it to the next level, you can get in on the TNO Discord by joining our Patreon by going to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. Speaking of that Patreon, that's where bonus content lives. If you're looking for more TNO content, bonus episodes, director's commentary, monthly live streams, those all live there. And speaking of that Patreon, I want to give a huge shout out to our producer level patrons: Lotta Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Emma Cooey, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Hoskovchova, Veronica Bartova, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Tuff Beifong, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Boney Pony, Heather McMillan, Casey Williams, Polly Burridge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Josh Sayre, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Wise Girl, Ashton Gabrielson, Marco Redhouse, Falcon Joey James, Christopher William Boucher, Lux, Caden Mack, Sam Reeby, Carly Allen, Riley Kiedis, Mary Kelly, Audra, McKenzie, Mrs. O'Leary, Aaron Wood, Rodith Kalna, Milo Kim, Fred Cabras, Harlan Christ, CC Reeds 23, Sandkopf, Julia Kendall, Emil Oskar Thomason, Noah Bungard, Liz Cardigan, Shatzabobs, Michelle Spurgeon, Zachary Hamilton, Ginger Spursboy, Rachel Bernatowicz, and Sarah Neal. If you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, spreading it via word of mouth is essential to the podcast's growth. If you think of someone that would like the show, you could reach out to them directly, say, hey, there's this podcast. You love Percy Jackson, listen to it. Or you've been looking for an excuse to read the Percy Jackson books, here's a digital book club. Or you could post about the show on social media, or leave it a rating and review on whatever podcasting app you're using. All of these things really do help, and I appreciate all of you who have done it in the past or will do it in the future. But I'm just so thankful that you tuned into this episode, and I hope you tuned into our next episode, where we will be joined by repeat guest Jania Stewart to discuss chapters 17 and 18 of Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse. But until then, I'll Percy you later. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. So in the lobby of this hotel/convention center, there's a big waterfall set up. So I took my phone and I took an audio recording of the waterfall. So here is 30 seconds of Denver hotel/convention center waterfall. I hope you enjoy. Thank you for listening.